Hello, everyone. My name is Faridah, and I'm going to spend some time introducing myself. So I'm from New York City. I'm a giant dork. I'm wearing a Dalek necklace. I went to the University of Pennsylvania. Go Quakers. That will never not sound weird. I also I love film and television. I love whiskey. I like long walks on the beach. I won't actually go through my entire dating profile. So my mother has given me 6 months to find a husband, or she's going to take matters into her own hands. But now that I've completely messed up my introduction, introducing yourself nowadays is really hard. We have all these different identifiers, and they make it really hard to tell our complete story. One of the ways that I have found to tell my story is to liken it to The Odyssey. The Odyssey is a great read. If you haven't read it, I don't know what high school you went to, but it's the story of this man who's on this journey home that takes much longer than he expected. He gets all of his men killed, but along the way learns life lessons and things about himself that help him when he does eventually make it home. That's a very loose translation of what the book is, the story is, but it's really important to my personal journey. For the last 6 or so years, I have been traveling the world and also traveling within the United States. And each one of those trips has been really important in making sure that I am now standing in front of you, a happy Black woman who's pursuing her dream to write and work in film and television. I use the identifiers Black and woman specifically because they've had the most effect on who I am. So I'm going to tell my story in the style of The Odyssey with far less dead bodies, but a little bit of sorcery here and there, and introduce myself. My first major journey as an adult was to Nigeria. I was in Lagos and Abuja for 3 months. To explain why I was there, I need to take a step back. I am Nigerian American. My parents came over in the 80s, and I am part of a growing dialogue, a shift in the African diaspora within the United States, where almost 15% of the Black people in the United States are first or second generation immigrants. And that reality had such an effect on my existence. I always felt like I was part of 3 communities that I was never doing any justice growing up. There was my Nigerian home, then there was being Nigerian in the African American community, and then there's the giant conversation of what it means to be Black in America. And they were constantly clashing. The one thing they all happened to agree on, unfortunately, was stigmatization of mental health. In university, I suffered from major depression and anxiety issues. And it was, a good portion of that is due to what has been termed the superwoman fallacy. Black women have really low treatment rates for mental health concerns, and a portion of that is because there's an assumption of weakness when it comes to mental health concerns. That as a Black woman, you should be able to handle it all. Be able to, so if you can't, you've somehow broken some superwoman aspect of your reality, and it makes it really hard to seek treatment. If I'm being honest, I was a pressure pot waiting to explode at my school. I had anxiety issues, self-esteem issues. There was, of course, the superwoman fallacy. And then there's the truth of the matter, as much as I love my alma mater, that in elite spaces were not created for minority participants. So I'm in this space, and I just kind of explode for a bit. Thankfully, I had great administrators at my school, mostly women, who came and helped me, could see the warning signs, and I took time off from school, and with their help, I came back a much healthier person. But during that time, due to some academic scheduling stuff, I was gone for a little bit longer than expected, and I needed something to do for 3 months. So I went to Nigeria. So I was in Nigeria for 3 months, and that trip was ultimately one of the best trips I've ever taken in my life, because it taught me that I was not existing in 3 separate communities. I was existing in one reality, and that reality had to be my reality. I was American and Black and Nigerian all at once. I couldn't do it separately. And that who I was would ultimately have to be enough. I'm sure you've heard like anxiety and mental health concerns are ongoing battles, but realizing that it was my battle and my narrative that I would have to deal with it and keep moving on helped me do the rest of my life to participate in my story. The other interesting thing was accepted that the only way that anyone else can respect my narrative, because I always felt like my voice wasn't being heard, was if I respected it myself. If I acknowledged that this is my true story and that it is valid and that everyone else should acknowledge it as that. So that was ultimately the foundation of who I am, and that trip was really important. After I graduated, I worked for a little bit and decided I didn't want to be in the States anymore, so I moved to South Korea. I was in South Korea for 2 years teaching in middle school, teaching English in a small city called Yeongju. We are a city, not a town. People like to make fun of Yeongju. It's a great place. 135,000 people counts as a city. So I moved there, and I don't know if you guys know a bit about Korea, but it's a pretty homogenous country. So I stood out because I'm a giant black woman, which was actually really freeing. There was no way to fit in, so I had to be all that I was in that space. So I'd always been interested in film and television, but it never seemed plausible. There's the creative career choice plausibility. It's when you're back at home, you're a doctor or a lawyer or something that involves a pre-professional school. But I always wanted to do it. The other reason why it didn't seem plausible was I didn't see a lot of representation of my narrative in media. There was lots of images, and I just felt like my story was not being told because no one wanted to hear aspects of my story. So I'm in Korea, I'm involved in the film community there, and they had a 48-hour film project. I don't know if there's one in Spokane, but it's a competition. You make a movie in 48 hours. And you have a team put together beforehand and lots of moving pieces. So a team took me in, which was very surprising and very exciting. And then they totally were enjoying my feedback and telling me all these great things, which was awesome to hear. And I was like, maybe I could actually do this. And then things got real when we won. So I was like, woo, exciting, my first film-related thing ever, and I have now a Glass Award. Well, I don't physically have it. It's being kept in Korea. I would really like it, but the team leader technically has more control over that. So I'm now excited and involved in film stuff. I start writing, I start PAing and script supervising. I build a social media presence and a personality, Black Woman Geek, and I'm now involved in media. And I think a portion of the reason why that had to happen in Korea is because I needed to be separated from this space. There was, in Korea, the foreigners, they're called Waeguks. I mean, there are issues with prejudices and racism in Korea, but in the amateur filmmaking space, we're all just foreigners. And in terms of pay, you know where everyone is, because we're all English teachers, so we're all technically in the same class, at least in the space of Korea. And I was finally on the same level as a lot of my white counterparts in the space where you see in media, which made it much easier for me to pursue my dreams and feel like I was actually part of the community and didn't have to do extra. The other thing about being in Korea was what I term the lie of the white default became glaring. When you watch something, you assume that that character has to be white because that's normal. But in Korea, default is Korean. They're gonna watch stuff starring Latinos, starring black people, starring white people at similar rates. It's about accessibility, not literally about it only being Tom Hanks that they connect to. It could just as easily be Forrest Whitaker. So recognizing that maybe the reason why I wasn't seeing my narrative on television wasn't because no one wanted to hear it, was because no one had access to see it prior. So my interest in media grew at that point because I realized I have an interesting story to tell and people might actually want to hear it. And I now have the space and the confidence to actually pursue it. After I left Korea, I did the stereotypical thing, which is go backpacking for 5 months. I did Southeast Asia, and then I had an unfortunate accident with a motorcycle and the burning of my leg, so I had to reroute and did Europe for about 5 weeks. Before I went on this trip, I wanted to do a bit of research. As a woman traveling alone, there are certain concerns that we're just naturally gonna have that other people don't have. We're in foreign spaces, and sexual violence is just a very recognizable thing that you're gonna have to deal with. Plus there's other stuff like tampons and stuff like that that you need to figure out where to buy. So I go on this trip, I'm looking up stuff, and I'm a little bit disheartened by the fact that I'm not seeing a lot of information about solo female backpackers. Not a lot of blogs. That has recently changed, but it's still in the minority. And then I started looking for Black travelers, and there was even less of that. And then when I looked at the intersection of Black female travelers, solo travelers, there was like 1 or 2 blogs, which was frustrating because I'm going on this trip that I see my peers going on, and I just don't have access to stories of the experience. But I'm the new improved version of myself, so I'm like, I'm gonna do it. And I thrived. It was an amazing trip. I had the best time. And like, I mean, some of it, the best time elements were, because I was literally doing like crazy things like being on a deserted island. But a good portion of it was also just something that I thought I never had access to growing up, I was now doing. The vision of the backpacker is usually a trust fund baby who's just going on this last hurrah. And I go on this trip, and my family is working poor, and I'm paying for this trip completely from my savings in Korea. And I fit in. This was a space I wanted to be in. And then I realized that the media narrative complications was even further. So like stories like Eat, Pray, Love, or stories in which niche stories that you think only specifically would go to one class group or one racial group were also open to so many groups. Mig Na Wen could be an Eat, Pray, Love. Like, it doesn't have to be this one specific group can tell these stories. I said that my life could now be cinematic. I don't know, a lot of you look a bit young, but if you guys remember the movie The Beach with Leo in it, there's no reason why it couldn't have been Denzel. Granted, I don't know if Denzel Washington would have made the same life choices Leo makes in that movie, but I liked knowing and just having access to that, so I can tell more non-traditional stories with non-traditional narratives. So the other thing about backpacking that helped me grow was in Europe. When I was there, I was fundamentally treated differently than Black Europeans. So a lot of the Black Europeans are more recent immigrants from Africa. And the blue passport, for better or worse, made it that my life was just ultimately very different. You could tell how people approached me, and then when I spoke with an American accent, there would just be such a clear shift. And then I realized I was existing in a fourth community my entire life that I hadn't really given any voice to. And that community is what it means to be a Black American in the world, in terms of the diaspora. And confronting one's privilege is always complicated and hard, but it's really important to understand your story completely. Our stories don't exist in bubbles. So backpacking was great for me recognizing that there's more narratives to be told, and that my narrative is way more complicated than I originally thought. So I get back to the United States, I'm like pumped and excited to get involved in my film life and do all these things, and my bank account said no. They're like, you spent all your money, you were way over budget. So I got a job, and I saved money when I was working in the job because I really wanted to pursue my dreams in film, in television and writing. And then I decided to quit my job, which I quit it right at the right time because apparently my team became defunct like a week later. So I started going to film festivals. So film festivals are supposed to be showcases of independent cinema. You're seeing lots of different stories and narratives that you don't see in mainstream films. So I was really excited to be involved in film festivals, and that's essentially what I do. I hop from film festival to film festival. I literally, yesterday, just got off a plane from New Orleans working at that film festival. Amazing fest. So I'm in this space, and I'm really excited to just be involved with film and seeing new stories. And I'm unfortunately disappointed to see that it is mostly men and mostly white people. So I'm in that space, and I'm just like, crap. What next? I mean, there are other disappointments, like of the technical form. I'm a writer, and writers apparently aren't sexy in the film world. You go out, and they're like, ooh, writer, not interesting. You can be a director, you can do something else. No one really wants to meet the writer. So I'm in this space, and I'm just like, crap, it's gonna be way harder than I thought it was going to be. But I've been through so many things at this point that I realized that I can get through this, just like I've gotten through everything else. And it also made me want to grow a new goal. So now I'm actually traveling around to these film festivals with the intention of building my own film festival in the future that focuses specifically on emergent voices, low-budget filmmaking, and non-traditional narratives. I want everyone's story to be told so that there are no more defaults. Every story is a valid story. So every one of these travels has helped me grow to be the person in my dreams and my aspirations in this moment. To tie it back to the Odyssey, because that was where we started, Odysseus goes back home, and he comes back to this entirely new space. Things have changed. He's worried his wife is cheating on him. Granted, he's been gone for 20 years, so that's a weird worry, but everyone thinks you're dead. And he has to participate in this competition in which he has to prove that he's actually Odysseus and that he belongs there. I feel like my personal journey is kind of that moment. I've come back this new person, and I'm trying to prove that who I am is where I'm supposed to be, that my rightful place in media. So all of my struggles, both personal and institutional, are all just steps for me to step into my rightful place in media, because I believe that is my space, that I have an interesting story to tell, and I have access to so many interesting stories that I want to tell. And that's ultimately my goal. So this is probably the longest introduction you've probably heard. If it isn't, you need better friends. But thank you so much for listening to me, and hope you have a great rest of the TEDx.